Okay, here we go. Well, already welcome to UFO Secret Space. And you're recording the call too. Okay, we're both recording, so we'll make sure we get this. My name is Janet Carol Lessin, and I'm your host, and Bret Lueder is our guest today. And we're going to talk about Bret's background and his book that he's written. I think there's 2 books. He's going to tell us his bio, because I'm not sure how to get to it without losing this screen. So I would just have Bret. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
For coming.
Always a pleasure to be here, Janet.
Yes, it's always a pleasure to have you on our show. We've done at least 2, maybe 3 shows before over the course of the year. I think the first time it was 2016 or 2017, something like that.
Something like that.
And here we are. It's 5 years, whatever. Tell us about yourself. It's been a while since we've chatted. This is a new group of listeners. Who are you, Bret Lueder? Who are you about?
Isn't that a great question, right? Who among us can say if we know ourselves really well or not? That's kind of why we came here, right? To figure out who we are. So what I do know,
sometimes we think we are our programming. We think we are as we are defined by society. Like I'm my dad's daughter, and then I was my husband's wife, and I'm a female, and I'm a human being. Right. So how do you identify yourself? Who are you? Well, I'll let you answer. Go ahead.
So great points, right? Because I was just born into this world, and then I had these people, my parents, tell me my name was Bret, and that I was a male, right? These things we just know what other people are telling us. Literally, we're in a tricky spot coming here to Earth, but I can tell you what I do know about myself. Supposedly, I was born in 1968 to some nice parents, and I played lots of soccer when I was a kid, lots of sports. We took lots of vacations. I had a pretty good upbringing. And part of that upbringing was my parents sharing with me various paranormal movies or TV shows or books that now, looking back, are classics. For example, my parents, as a family, we went and saw Chariots of the Gods, the Eric Von Daniken movie. Saw that at the theater, right? Pretty incredible. I was a huge Star Trek fan from when I was really young. I used to sit on the couch and watch Star Trek with my dad. And on from there, you got Out on a Limb by Shirley MacLaine. That was huge when I was little. Leonard Nimoy's In Search Of TV show was huge for me. The Legend of Bogey Creek was another one that I remember from back then, about that real scary kind of Bigfoot event. I think it was in Oklahoma or Missouri or something like that. And, so I have a healthy science fiction background. I've always been interested in the planets and finding out about where our country came from. History has always been fascinating to me. And so, I went to college at Chico State. I'm skipping forward a bunch, right? No one wants to hear all the little details, but, I went to college at Chico State, and, my major is public relations it's a journalism major with an option in public relations. And, I got to actually shake the hand of E.L. Bernays, one of the history cites as one of the inventors of public relations. And he was 90-something years old when he visited our school, but we had a really highly reputable public relations school. So he wanted to come visit. On top of that, my buddy's mom was dating E.L. Bernays. She was E.L. Bernays' secretary, Janet Vondra. And so my buddy Derek and I used to talk all the time about, E.L. Bernays was like 30 years older than her, and how much of a stud he was to be dating such a younger woman,
He was dating when he was 90.
He was
dating when he was 90.
Yeah, and it started in his 80s, right? She was his secretary, and the relationship developed over the years. And so that because of our school and because his secretary's son was at Chico State, E.L. Bernays himself came out to Chico State. And so we had a big gathering at Sylvester's Cafe, which was on campus, and I got to wait in line and actually shake his hand. It was pretty cool. So all these years later, right, I'm at Chico State. I'm about to graduate, and I go and visit some friends down in L.A., some family and friends. And on my way back up, I work my way up the coast, and I go visit a friend in Santa Barbara, or Lompoc more specifically. And he had been a civilian employee on Vandenberg Air Force Base before college. And then he and I met at Chico State on the Chico State soccer team. So he had already graduated and gone back to Lompoc and got his old job back on Vandenberg Air Force Base as a civilian employee. And he sent me this, he phone called me. We didn't have text and stuff back then, but he called me and said that he had this interesting document that he got from the base, that a friend of his on the base told him if he went to this certain place on the computer, he could download this file. Well, this file I've since dubbed the packet. And it was really my first introduction into UFOs and ufology. And this packet turned out to be, I would find out later, because it said it right on the packet that it was an affidavit of William Milton Cooper. But I did not know who that was at the time, right? It wouldn't be years later that that was the legendary Bill Cooper. And he wrote, as we know, he wrote the book Behold a Pale Horse. It's a classic in the field at this stage. And so in this affidavit, it talked about, that the Japanese had the film of Who Shot Kennedy, that the gray aliens couldn't reproduce, so they needed us for genetics experiments that explained the abductions, and all kinds of odd stuff. It was like a conspiracy person's dream to have supposedly all these answers to all these big questions. It talked about Roswell. It was only about 30 pages, and then it ended with a handful of UFO reports, a couple of which were from Red Bluff, California, which was just up the road from Chico, about 45 minutes. And so that really caught my attention. Here I am in the middle of nowhere, Chico State University, which is about an hour and a half north of Sacramento in Central California. And the UFO thing, I'd only thought was in maybe major cities or something. I wasn't fully aware what was going on yet, but this was in my neck of the woods. So that really intrigued me. But on that trip back, I showed that packet to two other sets of friends on consecutive nights. On the third night, I was heading back up to Chico. And those of our listeners who are familiar with California, I-80 comes from San Francisco and heads east. It goes all the way across the United States. But before it gets to Sacramento, there's like the hypotenuse of a triangle, this 505 cutoff, which starts to head north. And it meets up into I-5, which goes from Oregon all the way down to San Diego. So I'm on 505. It's completely barren, right? No, not very many houses up there at that time. I pull over at my favorite spot to relieve myself, and I see what I thought was a UFO. And this thing was jumping around like I would later learn Bill Hamilton wrote in Alien Magic. He called them jumpers, where these lights would skip around. Mine was doing circles.
Let me ask you a couple of questions about what you saw. How close was it? Was it tree height? Was it a dot in the sky?
There's no way to tell. It was in the sky. I thought it was a star at first. Okay?
So it looks like a star.
It looked like a star until it started moving. And I'm like, as I'm relieving myself, you can picture this, I'm looking up going, hey, that's like one of those UFOs I've heard about. Hey, that's cool. What? What? Oh my God. Cause I'd read a couple books by then. One of them was couple Whitley Strieber books that talked about the abductions where people get abducted, right? And so my immediate thought was, oh, hey, that's cool. And then I realized, hey, I'm in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like primed for if that stuff's true, I better get out of here. So I jumped in my car. There's an overpass that comes onto I-5 from 505. And as I'm up above everything, looking across back to the west, I could see this light moving with me. It was in between me and the mountain range because it was below the silhouette of the Mendocino range. So I'm thinking, oh, great, right? Great. So I'm kind of freaking out. I go to the nearest rest stop, which was in Artois, and there's a series of perpendicular parking that faces the highway. And the rest stops are on both sides of the freeway. So I was on the northbound side of I-5 heading north, pulled over in the stoplight, and I'm freaking out. I'm trying to think who I could go to talk to about this or whatever. And it was just weird. It was kind of windy and the lights kind of parted. And you got to realize all those rest stops have lightsaber lights, and so they're yellow. And so all of a sudden, in the middle of nowhere, the trees part on the southbound rest stop, and there's this big light that's just like sitting there waiting for me. And I'm going, oh, geez, right? So
how big is it? How big is the light at that point? Has it dropped down? Is it tree height? Is it?
It was definitely lower, but it was just a light still. It was bigger than a star, of course, and it was definitely bigger than a street light, and it was bigger than all the lights, all the yellow lights that were at the rest stop. So, so there's no for sure knowing what it was. I don't really know what it was. I just assumed it was this light I saw before. So I'm going, okay, well, I got to make it to this certain friend's house of mine, a buddy of mine that I'd talked to about this kind of thing before. So I get back out on the freeway and start heading north of I-5, and there's this light following me up, like paralleling me as I come up. Well, I drove into, parallel to I-5 is a smaller highway called Highway 45. I got off on Highway 5 because I was supposed to find this overpass that went back over I-5 onto the west side of I-5 where I could find my buddy's place. Well, I wound up driving into a fog bank, and I never found my buddy's place. Next thing I know, I'm almost out of gas, and my thought was, oh, my God, I better get back to Chico before I run out of gas. So that seems to be a huge turning point in my life. Several people have suggested that I was abducted. I've tried to be regressed by several hypnotherapists. Nothing has seemed to work. So I'll stay open to that possibility that I was abducted. I don't consciously know that I was abducted, but that's been suggested by several people. And, but it's true.
That.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what's the last thing you remember?
Well, I just remember driving in. I just said, I drove into this fog bank. At some point in the fog bank, I looked down and I was out of gas. So while I didn't check a clock, people look for missing time to see if they've been abducted. I wasn't aware that there was missing time, but I did think it was really curious that all of a sudden I was out of gas when I could have sworn I had more gas than that. So it tells me that if I was abducted, I was abducted straight out of the car of my S10 Blazer, and the motor was still running, and I was put back in it when it was done, and the motor was still running. So because it ran out of gas, it must have been running while I was gone, if that's what happened, right? So again,
what happened? So you went back to Chico and got gas.
Yeah. I went back to Chico before I ran out of gas. I wound up telling my roommates what happened. They laughed at me, right? So I got an early dose of what not to say to the wrong people. And then it was after that I got really just a real healthy interest, I think, building on my childhood about UFOs. And I began to study UFO, read books here and there. The Strieber books were really big for me. The Visitor series, he calls it, starting with Communion, which was made into a movie with Christopher Walken, my favorite actor. And he was really good in that movie, too.
It's a long time I've seen that. That'd be good. That'd be worthwhile watching again. Yeah,
it's a classic, right? So when I became a writer, well, actually what happened was I got into an auto accident, made one of the big front pages of a section of our local paper, took 5 guys to get me out of it. I was headed back to the Bay Area where I was from to become a salesman of some kind because several males in my family had success being salesmen. So that's what I was thinking I was going to do after college, right? College was over. Then I got into this auto accident. I could have easily died. The front of the cab got pushed down and my head jammed into the top of my cab and the front windshield bent down with the cab and my head landed in the steel part right to here. So I had glass shavings from here down. And so it was like 1 inch later and I would have been blinded probably with glass shavings in my eye. It took 6 guys to get me out of the truck and I walked away from it.
What happened that you?
What?
Was it one car? What happened that you wrecked? Was it one car? Was it a?
So I was heading home from work that day, and I was going down. It was Durham-Dayton Highway, which comes off of I-5 and heads west, and it's south of Chico, and it's a big open country road. and you can see for a long ways. It's a big straightaway, right? So I could see way ahead of me there was this, what I later found out was a dairy feeder truck. And it's like a garbage truck. It's about that size. But instead of a garbage thing on the back, it has a big giant metal box that they could load and offload. Okay? So I could see this thing way ahead of me. And so I sped up thinking, well, there's nobody coming. I'm going to pass it real easy, right? Well, as I got into the oncoming lane, went to pass it, and that sucker flipped his blinker on and started turning in front of me. So I had to make a choice, right? I was braking and had to make a choice. I thought he was going to continue the turn. So I went to the right to try to pass him and let him come out of my way. And he saw me at the last second and flipped back into the lane. And so I jammed under his right rear. So they got these big, huge bumpers, and it crushed my front end. My legs were trapped underneath the console. The steering column dropped onto my legs. I couldn't get out myself. I had metal in both of my knees, and I couldn't move. I was kind of knocked out, you know, and so it took guys pulling stuff, metal back and stuff, and a CHP guy had to stand on my driver's seat so I could lower my leg off of the metal because it was stuck in my knee, and then I could step out, and then I walked out. And the officer was quoted as saying roughly that in his 22 years of service, he had never seen anyone walk away from something like that. So that was.
Did you have any injuries?
I had,
anyway?
Both my knees were injured. I didn't have to have surgery though, but I was laid up for 6 weeks. Couldn't play soccer. Couldn't walk for the first couple weeks. And, I had some head injuries. They were pulling glass out of my face because I had some whiskers going at the time. And glass shavings were all embedded in my side of my face. And, but nothing too serious, right? What that served to do in my life was it stopped me from going to the Bay Area and committing what I call sales-aside, which is death by being a salesman. You're trying to fill a quota as a salesman, so you're not making sales right, and so you get all kind of anxious because you got to pay bills, but you can't do that unless you make sales, and so then you get nervous and you start eating more and you're drinking more coffee and more sugared and caffeine sodas. You're bloating up, and so that's what I call slow death by sales aside. So, So while I was rehabbing, I saw an ad in a local rag called Synthesis Magazine. It was all about music. And it said they were looking for writers. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. They said they were going to pay for me to go see the band Dred Zeppelin, and they were going to I was going to have free beer. So I said, wow, I just got to write up like 600 or 700 words and I get free beer all night? Go get to see a killer band for free? I'm down, right? So that was the start. That was my first published article, was about music. It was in November of 1996. And, since then, I've gone on to write for 15 plus publications, and I have probably, at least 700 published articles across those publications. And, we're talking Ufo Magazine, Magical Blend, Phenomena Magazine Online, Paranoia Magazine here out of the Bay Area. I've been published in Paranormal, the classic Paranormal magazine. So, that's where it kind of started for me, right? And at some point along that line, I knew Vicki Jack from the Bay Area UFO Expo. And she was approached by Wiser Books out of San Francisco, and they asked her if they knew anyone that could write a UFO book for them. So she asked Ruben Uriarte first, and Ruben said he was busy. He's doing his own series of books. Then it fell to John Rhodes, who's writing his own book, Dragons of the Apocalypse. Last time I checked, Rosemary Ellen Guiley was helping him, and then she since passed away like a year ago. So I need to contact John to find out what's going on. Yeah, Rosemary Ellen Guiley passed away, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, she does some great work. The Jinn Connection is a great book, if anyone wants to learn about the Jinn. Yeah, so John said that he was waiting to write The Dragons of the Apocalypse was the title of his book. That's going to be such a good book when it comes out. John Rhodes, for those that study, John Rhodes is the original source of David Icke's reptilian information.
Oh, yeah.
A whole big backstory to that we really don't have time to get into now. But so John said no. So I was lucky number 3. Vicky Jack asked me to write a book if I would write a book for Weiser. She put me in touch with Weiser, and that book became my second published book, and that's called A UFO Hunter's Guide. And so that book, I don't know if you've read that yet or not. No offense if you haven't, but it covers the whole field of ufology.
I did go to Victoria Jack's conferences. I don't know when they started. I went to a number of them. I went every year.
It started in 99, I think, and ran through 2010. So 98 or 99 through 2010.
I think I went to all of them. I probably saw you there.
We probably did, right? It's a tight knit group of. It's like a family kind of, and I learned how fun those expos are, because every year for 4 days I'd see the same people. I wouldn't see them all year usually, but when I came back for that expo, right, it was like we were family. And God, the great conversations that you have and the people you meet are just awesome.
Do you know Ben from Chico?
I do. He was one of my early video guys.
Right. So he's a
Benjamin Hill.
Benjamin Hill, yes.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's where we met Ben Hill.
Okay. Yeah, his wife Jean Louise is my Rolfer.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, she's like world class. Yeah.
I'll have to take Sasha over there. He's been trying for a Rolfer.
Yeah, there's nobody like Jean Louise Green, let me tell you.
What's that?
I said there's nobody like Jean Louise Green. She's one of a kind, man. Go if you can get treatment from her, you're really lucky.
Well,
so yeah.
Likes golfing. It's good golfer anymore here. So,
yeah.
So it's a small family. So and then Dave and I got into a fight with Victoria, and I intervened, and because I started to know David back then, because he came over here and did a conference here. Just his presentation, just him. And he stayed at my house for a month. So I hit him up because he wanted a vacation. I said, well, I'll give you a free vacation. I had an empty apartment at the time. So he and his wife came over, and they got to go to Big Island and back here. They used us for a home base. And then something happened with Vicki and David, and somehow I negotiated it, and so he went back, and so you flew over that I think was the last one, 2010, right? That was the last one.
He wasn't at the last one, but he did 2 of them with her. And if I remember correctly, there was a dispute over money, which happens, it's unfortunate, but it got worked out somehow. So if you were a part of that, thank you for doing that.
I don't remember what I did. I just remember I was talking to Victoria all the time, and she invited me to come on and do my story, and I said, I'm not ready yet. I was too camera shy, too shy to go on stage with my story yet. So you went on the time, though, right? You were on. Victoria had you on. I first
spoke for Victoria in 2008, and then again in 2009.
Okay, so I saw you on stage there, so I was aware of you.
Okay.
And I met you at Roy and Fenton's conference.
Probably.
We had the meals together.
Okay.
Lori had big deals with everybody.
Sure.
Right? So that's when we were hanging out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got the backstory. Okay, so you're working. You wrote the Bay Area. What do you call it? The UFO guide of the Bay Area. The Bay Area. Yeah, you did 2 volumes, right?
I did 2 video sets of interviews with speakers from the Bay Area UFO Expo, and it's called The Esoteric Guide to the Bay Area UFO Expo, Volume 1 and 2. And they're collections of interviews of speakers. Yeah.
Wow. So you just started and then you went into deep end. Okay, so then what happened after that?
Well, after that, I was already writing my first book called Song in Your Heart, The Story of the Search for the Lost Note. And that was a product of after, reading lots of books, of course, but I got to know Jordan Maxwell a bit, and I did some interviews with Jordan Maxwell. Wrote a series of articles for UFO Magazine on Jordan. I've written about David Icke as well for UFO Magazine. And so after studying all these guys, I realized that these guys like Bob Marley, they're called roots reggae performers, or which many of them are Rastafarians. Rastafarians are a religious faith that believe that the emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, which was from the roughly 1930 to I think 68 is when he got deposed. He was seen as the second coming of Christ because they supposedly have genealogical documents that are in the line of Solomon and David, which would make him related to Jesus, right? They're all related slowly in the line of David. And so they go around singing about this, right? But while they're singing about the second coming of Christ or Selassie, they're also talking about this metaphor called Babylon. And it's a metaphor for modern society. And they see modern society today as a reflection of the evil wickedness, like it says in the Bible, of ancient Babylon, which is over, as you know, today's Iran, in between the Tigris and Euphrates River, somewhere in that area. And so they literally, these roots reggae singers, especially Bob Marley, was talking about what us on the western fringe of society are talking about as called a conspiracy. So they didn't think it was called a conspiracy. They thought it was real, and they're singing about it. So my first book, called Song in Your Heart, The Story of the Search for the Lost Note, is the story of the global struggle for the control of human consciousness. And seeing it that way, these roots reggae Rasta guys are literally performing music, or another way to look at it is a mind control technique to try to wake people up to these crimes against humanity that have been going on for thousands of years. You could follow those crimes all the way up in today's current events, right? But it goes back thousands of years. And as you know, guys like David Icke and Jordan Maxwell can trace this all the way back thousands of years. So
it gets all perverted by everybody that looks at it. So it's like it depends on where you're looking at it. It's like that's what Sasha and I do. So if you go back to the Anunnaki, of course Babylon was Marduk's. So he was just evil and wicked because he was against Yahweh, which was Enlil. So that's what they do. They demonize whoever they're fighting against. But it's not necessarily that they're the evil and bad ones. The white hat, dark hat argument keeps going. By whoever wins the war or loses battle, they become the satanic force or the evil force. So anyway, so that's just a little aside there. So they're telling us we do have the control of humanity going back, and I talked to a guy that's developing a series on the Anunnaki earlier today. They had a long meeting. But it's complicated. It's more complicated than that. We put everything black and white, black hat, white hat. But it was just different factions that were vying to control the planet. And part of it was there were too many humans and not enough Anunnaki. They created the humans, but the humans were able to breed like rats, and the Anunnaki rarely had children. They were almost sterile. It was very like once every 1,000 years they'd have a kid, and they really celebrated it. So there were only about 1,000 Anunnaki and millions of humans. So that's part of this understructure of divide and conquer, issues and religions and politics and countries and everything separate. So we keep seeing each other as demons. Anyway, I'll go back to you, but that's what we've been tracking down, how this started, and it's really complicated. But the modern conspiracy movement, which, of course, we go back to David Icke, they've taken it, and like everything else, if you go back to the original Jesus story, and then you go to the Bible warped what really went on. And we weren't there, so we don't know 100% what happened. But we can trace back certain times where they changed the Bible, like the Fifth Ecumenical Council of Nicaea. They took the Bible and they broke it down into what we have today. So, okay, back to you.
Yeah. So the Rastafari, through their own experience, through slavery and their own, they claim that they're the tribe of Ham. And so because going back to the Old Testament, when Ham saw his dad naked, supposedly that was a sin. And so the tribe of Ham has been cursed. And so that's how they see themselves. And so they see They see them as being punished for that, and that's why they had to go through slavery. But while they're in slavery, they're analyzing what's going on to them, and they wind up describing a similar situation as what guys like Jordan Maxwell and David Icke and Jim Mars and Michael Tessarian and many others. Oh, if you want to go old school, Myron Fagan or Nesta Webster, figures like these were describing this conspiracy. They were describing the same thing as what these roots reggae Rasta guys, as I call them, were describing, but in song, right? They're singing songs. And so I see them going around the world playing concerts using key rhythms to unlock the listener's consciousness, right? And then they hit it with information. And they're like
some of the things they're saying, like, give us 2 or 3 things that they're saying in their songs that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, okay. So there's many examples of this, but not many people know, less people know about all the breadth and history of the reggae music. But Bob Marley's Redemption song is perfect. We need to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, right? That's a huge lyric in that song. None but ourselves can free our own minds. So we've been trapped into this. They're not necessarily laying blame. They keep it simple with a good and evil metaphor. But the end result, I think, is the same, that when we wake up, we can choose not to be part of this or part of the quote unquote conspiracy, right? So the Redemption song is a huge song. Bob Marley has another song, Babylon by Bus. You could go to Burning Spear, Ecomouse, Israel Vibrations. There's so many, Wailing Souls. They're all in their own way have songs about Babylon and what to do. And you praise Jah and you pray and turn your life good and don't be bad. And right. So
what about the hair? I lots of Rastafarians come through Mali and some live here. So it doesn't matter what your skin is, you can dreadlock your hair, black or white or whatever race you.
Sure.
What's behind dreadlocks? The hair?
Well, just like with Christianity, there's hundreds of different sects of Christianity, hair-splitting differences philosophically that they each have, each one thinking that they have more of the truth than the other one. Well, the Rastas broke into different factions as well. One of them believe that it's a sin to cut your hair. And then they cite certain passages in the Bible. So you got to grow dreadlocks in order to keep your hair growing like that, right? Well, there's another sect called the Comsums. And they say that, no, you must cut your hair because you got to stay clean in the eyes of the Lord. So just because someone has dreadlocks doesn't necessarily mean that they're a Rastafari. It might mean it, but it might not. So it just depends what the ones with the dreadlocks, I think, are called the dreadlocks. They're called the dreadlock faction. And then the Comsums are like the opposite of the dreadlocks. So while they both would see Selassie as the second coming of Christ, they differ on some, no pun intended, hair-splitting differences. Right?
Hair-splitting. So what about the consumption of marijuana?
Yeah, pretty much universally, they might have some hair-splitting differences here too, but Rastas will cite that ganja or hemp was grown on Solomon's grave. And so they claim that makes that plant divine. And of course, when you smoke it, you get psychoactive. And they felt like it put them closer to God. So that's where that connection is. They think that it brings them closer to God. So which is ironic, I think, if it's not true, because now in the West, we've actually legalized it because of the medicinal qualities. So, the Rastas really are innovators on a number of levels. And I make a case in my first book, and I'll elaborate in my second book in the trilogy. My first book, Song in Your Heart, The Story of the Search for the Lost Note, is book 1 in the trilogy. The second book is called Tales of a Heavy Heart, UFOs, Magic, and Impending Doom. I'm writing that one now. And in that book, I'm going to elaborate further. There's a quantitative study done by the Fetzer Institute and the and the Fetzer Institute and the Noetic Institute. And they sponsored this survey called the Cultural Creatives. Have you heard of that?
Oh, yeah.
The famous study,
that's
right?
what they call the Marley New Age people, the cultural creatives.
Okay,
Over here, they use that.
So when you look in that book by Paul Anderson and Sherry Anderson and Paul H. Ray, you see they list a big list of traits that identify this new movement of people that's coming out of the modernist movement and the traditional movement, were the two main movements in North America that shaped our social structure in America. Well, most of those traits were being done by the Rastas in communes in Jamaica 70 years before the study was done. So when Paul H. Ray and Sherry Anderson say that they can't figure out how these different groups in American society, how they all see the same thing because there's no like leader group leading the way, I can make the case that, well, that's the Rastas. That's the Roots Reggae Rastas. Not only were they doing cultural creative things and lifestyles long before they were doing them in the West, but they've got this music that backs them that takes those messages around the world. It's a perfect public relations campaign for them. So this is the impact that the Rastas have had on Western society and back on Africa and around the world through the music. And it's just always fascinated me how, different cultures look at the same thing differently because they're looking through different eyes, right, from their own experience. And so I think the Rastafari's viewpoint, again, to simplify, on the subject called conspiracy, really sheds light on not only the validity of the conspiracy, but that it's global. It affects all cultures, first world to third world, and to one extent or another, everybody's a part of it.
Bob Marley and I have the same birthday, February 6th. So
all right,
his birthday's coming up.
Very good.
And Ronald Reagan. Is that a combination? Marley,
wow, that's quite a mix right there.
It's a mix. What happened that he passed? When did Bob Marley die? I know he died pretty young.
You're really getting me now. I think it was like in 81, and he had apparently, the story is he'd been playing soccer barefoot and got an injury on his toenail, and he got all bloody and stuff, and so then he tried to wear shoes, and then it would just fester, and supposedly he died from cancer that he got from that injury, right? But there's a guy named Roger Steffens, who used to be the publishing editor of the Beat magazine, which is no longer in print. He did a story because there's conspiracy theories that surround Bob Marley's death, right? And so the conspiracy theory is that because he had this festering wound on his toe, that somehow a CIA agent was able to implant cancer in the toe. And Roger Steffens did an article with Carl Colby Jr., who is the son of the CIA agent Carl Colby Sr., who was assigned to Bob Marley. And he says that there's no conspiracy, it's all made up. And so, I don't know exactly what happened to Bob, whether that's real or not. But you got to know when the CIA is involved, it's probably not good, right?
It's not good.
So,
well, yeah, maybe some their listener can write to us and tell us. Oh, hold on. Okay. Mix that. Okay. So you wrote this book, and what happened next? What year did you write that book? The Song in Your Heart.
My first book came out, Song in Your Heart, The Story of the Search for the Lost Note, came out in 2008. And I had been working for a paper for Synthesis Magazine in Chico, and they had problems with, there's a pecking order with the writers. If you've been there longer, you get to choose more who you get to talk to and do interviews and articles with, right? So I was the new guy, so they kicked me all the stuff that they didn't want, which was like heavy metal or blues or reggae. And in reggae was at least in part because they couldn't understand them with their Jamaican patois. So I did some interviews with local reggae guys that helped my understanding and learning. And then the Wailers bassist, Aston Family Man Barrett, dropped in my lap. And, that's the bass player that backed up Bob Marley. And from, not the original bass player of Bob Marley, that's Fully Foolwood. We could talk about him a little later. But Soul Syndicate was an early Bob Marley backer, but then they were out of the way, and the band was working with a different producer, and so the Wailers were that studio's studio band. So Bob Marley and the Wailers, originally the Wailers was a 4-part harmony group. It didn't have anything to do with Bob Marley. But then when the band came together with Bob Marley, that slowly became the Wailers. And so there's former members of the band that people don't really talk about, like Beverly Kelso was one of the four of the 4-part harmony that's not really in the picture or mentioned anymore. But the I3s, which is Judy Mowat, Marcia Griffiths, and then Bob Marley's wife, I'm forgetting her name, not Cedilla, that's the grandma, Rita Marley. Those were the I3s that backed up Bob Marley in the main part of his career. Anyway, that band backed Bob Marley throughout most of his career, and so that they came through Chico. And they had a different singer. The singer's name was Gary Pine, and he had this big head full of dreadlocks, and he sounded similar to Bob Marley. And so they played all the hits, right? And they would sell out shows everywhere they go. Well, when they came to town, they were looking for some press. So my editor said, "Hey, do you want to interview Aston Family Man Barrett?" And so I go, "I'm on it," right? So literally, Janet, through the hour interview or so, I went like this most of the time. Right? Yeah. And I couldn't understand a word he said. Okay. But the patois has part English in it. So I could understand every so often. I could kind of get what he was saying. And then I would ask other questions and keep it going. Right. And so after that interview, I had to get with a local reggae guy, DJ Boomshot, who's now in Maui right now. He left Chico a couple years ago and he's doing radio shows in Maui. DJ Boomshot sat me down at my house and helped me translate what Aston Family Man Barrett was telling me on that phone call. And that became a huge article in Synthesis. And he was talking about the conspiracy.
Did you record it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And
he's listening to it.
Yeah, so we're listening together, and he's telling me what Aston is saying in the interview, and I'm just being blown away. Aston Family Man Barrett was talking about the conspiracy through the metaphor of Babylon.
Wow.
And so that really blew me away, Janet, because I started to realize, hey, this is the same thing that guys like Jordan Maxwell are talking about. What is the connection, right? And so that's where my trilogy is born, is trying to figure out the connection between the roots reggae Rastas in Jamaica, the reggae musicians, and Western fringe conspiracy research. And so the first book is called Song in Your Heart, The Story of the Search for the Lost Note. And I run the gamut of conspiracy theories, and try to explain some, whatever, through the eyes of the Rastas and also my own experience. So that's basically the first book. The second book is a continuation of that, but we're going to explore different topics. So in part 1 of the second book, which again is Tales of the Heavy Heart, UFOs, Magic, and Impending Doom, the working book cover is on my Facebook page. It's the backing one. If you go right to my front page, it's the one with the heart and the electricity, the lightning bolt light coming down. It's the Earth-shaped heart. Anyway, that's the second book. Tales of a Heavy Heart, UFOs, Magic, and Impending Doom. First part's going to be all about my experience with the feminine energy. Like, there's literally a point in time when I didn't even know that I had a feminine part to me, right? No one ever taught me that, right? And so that was a mind blower for me for a while. And so all the ramifications of that. Then the second part's going to be all about the law, which is, it's hugely important, and most people overlook that. And the third part is going to be about just the craziest stuff that I've seen in ufology, from crop circles to abductions to this whole discussion, the crossover between aliens, demons, angels, jinn, archons, that whole group of beings, right? And we're probably gonna, I'm not sure exactly how I'm gonna end it, but it's gonna be it'll be something good, right? It'll be some time travel, something, space battle or something.
Yeah.
So
let's unpack that, because that's a lot you said. Do you have the list of chapters in your first book? You don't have it with you, do you?
I don't have it with me, but we could talk about it.
Or do you want to go to your second book? Do you have your list of chapters that you're going to do?
I'm busy writing right now, so I don't have chapter titles yet. I usually at some point in the creative process, it just strikes me and I'll start writing stuff down. But those little things, I think, at least for this book, because I've only written 2 books. It's not like I'm an expert at book writing. So I kind of go with what I've learned so far, and that's I kind of wait and let the ideas come to me, and when they come to me, they unfold. And so I don't really have chapter titles, but I just said the 3 themes that are going to be in the next book. And so
good outline.
Yeah, and so it's in flux a bit still. But if you want to go back to the first book, the first third of that book was called Reggae Magic. And it was my interpretation of what the reggae guys are doing, going around the world, affecting consciousness on what they think is a positive level. They think they're doing the right thing by teaching people alternative history through their music. Because they see like guys like Jordan and David and Michael Tsarian and Jim Mars and all these guys. I'll even throw a Nancy Red Star in there. She's been huge for me. These guys are all seeing the same things, but describing them through different cultural lenses. And that's really fascinating to me because it's not just a United States thing. It is a huge global thing. This, again, for lack of a better term, conspiracy.
Who do you think top of the pyramid?
I got a motorcycle outside here. I'm in Sacramento, so even though I'm on a side street, there's just guys blazing up and down the street all day. It's crazy. So please ask that question again. I'm sorry.
So, based on your research, the pyramid, the all-seeing eye, and it's a hierarchical system, and humanity's the bottom rung, and we're the slaves, and you have your CEOs, executives, and politicians, and priests and kings, and then there's somebody at the top of the all-seeing eye. And some people call that the Illuminati, and the Archons, and the Anunnaki, and the reptilians, or it could be the Dracos, probably Dracos. What do you think it is? Who's really in charge of this whole system, this whole paradigm that we're in there? We're like the chess. We're like the pawns in the chess game.
Right.
And who's going to bob the king, queens? Who's the one that's up above? Remember that Jason and the Argonauts? They had the gods were looking down at the giant chessboard. And they moved the characters for viewing. Who do you think that is?
Well, that's why we're all doing what we're doing, right? Because we'd all like to know for sure who it is instead of all the speculation. Because between the list I just said and the list you just said, I think between the two of us, we just covered most of those bases of the basic theories of who different people think are in charge of it. But when I talked to Dr. Len Horowitz several years ago in Hawaii at the Steam Vent Inn, okay, I was there studying with Sonia Kalkar, who was my teacher at the time, and we were doing steam baths at Steam Vent Inn, and Len Horowitz showed back up. I think he was with Fred Allen Wolf, and they were just at some conference that was on the Big Island, and so I got to talk to both of those guys, and then Scott Huckabee was there, just learning how to tune the 9-note solfeggio scale to a 6-string guitar. That was pretty neat to watch. But Len Horowitz said this to me, and I took it to heart ever since then. He said, Bret, the darkness on this planet is so dark that he didn't think that humans could actually do that to other humans. And I still think about that periodically. And so to answer your question,
could do it to other, so he thinks it's not human.
He thinks
that what you just said?
He was telling me in his own way that he thought there was some other influence other than humanity. So along the lines of Jason and the Argonauts, right? There's beings that live longer than us. They have a bigger brain capacity than us, and they are affecting events that are greater than our human lifespans. So it's very difficult for humans to stay with it through the generations because we don't live very long compared to these beings, right? So I don't know who they are, and I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I do think they're interdimensional, and I do think that they've been with us for a really, really long time. So
let me add a couple things. Interesting you mentioned Scott Huckabee.
Yeah.
We had a tenant who was Charles Muir, the head of the Tantra movement.
Okay.
He lived here moved here in 97 for about 5 years. So one day, he called me and said, hey, I want to send somebody up for you to meet. I said, okay, because it's upstairs. It was Scott Huckabee.
Wonderful.
And he brought his guitar, and we just sat there for about an hour, and he said, well, let's just sing together. I said, well, wait, then we have no. So we were just ad-libbing for about an hour or so, me and Scott Huckabee, and I didn't know who he was, and I was just having a great time with him. And then they left, and then I found out later, he's famous, and they went, oh, I didn't know that. So that was interesting. Just a little aside, how weird my life is, like Forrest Gump. Now, I think we've had interactions with many different species, but the current ones from about 450,000 years ago to this day are the Anunnaki. I think they're behind Queen Elizabeth, the Nose Royals. I still think it's the Anunnaki. Marduk apparently was left. It's only been it's been less than a year for them. Their year is 3,600 years long. So they left. They supposedly left a lot of them, but they were coming back. Some of them were coming back. Some never left. Enki never left. Nimrod never left. Nimrod apparently is behind the Mary apparitions. A lot of them use avatars. Some say that Jesus is an Anunnaki, or one of my researchers says that Enki is Jesus, and he's the long-lived person like Merlin, like Methuselah, and he just changes his identity and goes from culture to culture. But that's just my research. And we've written 5 books on it, and I can't really prove it either. And it's not to say there aren't other beings, but there is the interdimensional factor to it. Apparently, and this is the David Icke part, and I don't know if it's true or real, but I'll just say it. It rings true to me because I had an experience. So at Balmoral, they have rituals where they bring forth the interdimensional being. Now, maybe the Anunnakis are interdimensional, but they're tall, they're much larger than humans. And anyway, apparently, according to David, Pindar is the father of William and Harry, and maybe even the third child that, what was her name? Diana had. She was pregnant and she died, apparently. So it could be the fellow she was dating, but she was special, so she was used in the rituals. So anyway, that was one story that David told me directly, and I said, that's interesting. And then after David left, because I was a Tantra teacher at the time, I get calls from all over the world. I get a call from this guy, and he eventually realized, he said, have you ever heard of Pindar? Like, yeah. He says, well, I'm Pindar. So he was talking to me. Then he did like a ritual on the phone with me, and it's like he had activated my astral traveling, and next thing I know, he's just talking, and I'm going through space, time. I go, whoa, this is real. Whoever this guy is, he's the real deal. Now, I wasn't afraid because I've been doing astral travel all my life. But, I mean, it was just phenomenal. Anyway, so there's this whole thing around this guy, Pindar, that was communicating with me. And at the very end, he did some very out of the ordinary, normal stuff that proved to me, there's always proof to yourself. I can't prove to anybody else. I can't even prove them alive, but, proof to me, enough circumstantial evidence. So, anyway, and I can't prove this. I can lay it out. I'm going to be working on a series of, maybe we'll have you come on, I'm doing a new series of interviews with this other guy who's going to help produce it. And we're going to go beyond the History Channel. We're going to go deeper into each aspect of this and connect all the dots between the spiritual, the conspiracy, and the Anunnaki, and the abduction phenomenon. Because all these things actually tie together. They really do. And I'm kind of in the middle tying this together. But you're one of those psychic researchers, too. So we're going to be calling upon to go beyond ancient aliens. We're going to go beyond the History Channel. Because they kind of do the top 40 version of reality. But we're going to go into the deeper level, like what's behind this whitewashed version of even the UFO conspiracy thing, kind of whitewash what's going on, right? So I don't know why they do that. They always do. They Disney things, or they Hollywoodize things. You know, poor Whitney Strieber's story, it was pretty good, but they make it into a Hollywood thing. And Travis Walton, they make it into a Hollywood thing. And we went and recorded for Ancient Aliens one time, Sasha Malone. And they don't put what is outside of their parameters. And so a lot of it ends up on the end, on the floor, the cutting floor. But
cutting floor, right?
There's a great, yeah. Okay, back to you.
Yeah, so, History Channel, they've set the bar in terms of the high level of documentary production for all of us in the field of the paranormal and ufology. And Von Daniken's work has been fleshed out far more than even Von Daniken did originally, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's a blessing to them that they've gotten to go 10 plus years on TV, but it's also kind of a curse because where do they go from here? It's the History Channel's number one show. It's probably, I'm guessing, the number one show of its kind on TV anywhere, and they're running out of material. So what are they going to do? So it's a blessing and a curse to have kind of gone on this long. But in this field, there's all kinds of disagreements between researchers, which is healthy, I think. And there's definitely some areas so there's definitely some areas where I think I could maybe explain better or have a different take on things than what their shows presented. But it's nothing personal, right? We all just want the truth. And the more angles we can have to look at something, the more complete of a picture we'll all have. So I definitely, like you, I think I can do some stuff that will take some of those subjects a little further. And I definitely see the limitations of those TV production crews. They know what makes them money, and sometimes that clouds the information because they know they don't want to take a risk and say what exactly the truth is if it differs from the formula that they've used to make money, right? So it's a blessing and a curse that they've had to come this way. So I definitely applaud you for wanting to take some of those subjects further, because I feel the same about me and my work as well. And so I think, was there a question in there, or am I just responding to what you said?
I want to say, I don't think there is the truth. I think we all have the elephant in the room. We all have perspectives, and that's the whole point of the game. That if we all had the same version of reality, it would be boring. We are here to diversify creation and to mix it up and make it interesting, make it fun. Because it's not the truth or the one and the only. It's the journey. If we had only one truth and one destination, and so we have all these different directions we go, and that's what's up. Are you familiar with Errol the Grey in the Alien Interview? It's a series by Lawrence Spencer. It's on YouTube, and he wrote a book. So Errol the Grey was the captured Roswell Gray.
Okay.
And she said that she wasn't really captured. She kind of volunteered. That wasn't her real form. They send their consciousness down into avatars. And so they didn't kill her. She just decided to leave at a certain point. But there was a nurse, apparently, that was telepathic, that could understand what she was saying.
Okay. You're talking about Matilda McElroy.
Yes, Matilda McElroy, which is a fake name. So anyway, yeah, so what they said, I had a point, I just lost my point. anyway, they were talking about how the Earth is a prison. It's a prison system, a prison planet, and they came down to try to accelerate consciousness for humanity. They gave us technology. They delivered the Roswell craft. That wasn't a crash. Oh.
Right.
Okay. I just have to. I don't know why I still have that on. I should shut that off. I never get called. It's only because I'm on the radio. Anyway, they lost 1,000 of their people when they came down into China, into Tibet, around the year 1000.
Okay.
And the human kind killed them. So their souls, they got trapped in this cycle of reincarnation. So we have some great souls that are here in human form. And Errol said that they're trying to figure out how this prison planet system was created billions of years ago. Nobody knows who created it, but apparently they're saying it isn't just criminals, but it was the people that didn't kind of mold into a mold got sent to this prison planet. So we are we're the Botany Bay colony of maybe this galaxy, maybe this universe, I'm not sure. So we keep going in and out of the cycle of rebirth. And so she said that they were delivering this craft so we could start catching up, and we've been reverse engineering it. And so they want us to help them figure out how to get out of this prison cycle system. So that ties in with some other of the conspiracy stuff. But I forgot the point why I was going down this road, so I'm going to pass it back to you. It might come back to me. Go ahead. Take it away.
As I'm doing research for the current book I'm working on right now is tentatively titled UFO and Inner Earth PR, which PR for public relations. And so as part of that research, there's a book I've been wanting to read for a long time called The Secret Journey to Planet Serpo by Len Caston. And in
yes.
Yeah. Great book, right? He did some really good work there, I think. And in that book, they talk about, I think they didn't call the EB Errol, they called him EB1, I think is what they called him in the Caston book, right? EB1. Yeah. And so then which is EBE for extraterrestrial biological entity, EBE. So they called that species the Ebens, and they're from Zeta Reticuli, a planet around Zeta Reticuli. And it turns out that's when I referred to the packet earlier in our talk, that this document that I got from a friend from Vandenberg Air Force Base, that's who they're talking about, the Ebens, okay? And the Ebens, there's all kinds of influence that supposedly the Ebens have on our society, as they're trying to shape it into I guess what they think is society should be like, right? So they claim that they created Jesus. They also introduced cloning to us, and to confirm what you said, yes, that after the first Roswell, there's more crashes in New Mexico that people don't normally hear about. But after the first one where some died, that's when we made the connection. But then they made a deal to do an exchange program, and as part of the exchange program, one of them was going to stay here to help us talk about our history or help us resolve. And I think that's Errol or EB1. And so, and then so the other part of that exchange program, according to Len Caston, is Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where at the end of that movie, the ship lands on Devil's Tower, if you remember, and we have this exchange with what look like what we would call maybe gray aliens, or just to. Not to stereotype using skin color as an identifier. We're going to have to change that. But they're Ebens now, right? So they're not grays anymore. They're Ebens. So according to Len Caston, there's this big theory that Steven Spielberg somehow got a hold of, I think it's called the Yellow Book. That's a secret book that was documenting all of the Air Force's contact with different craft and species. And a guy by the name of Gil Carson has republished the Yellow Book, and I haven't got it yet, but I'm going to purchase it. So that should be pretty interesting. So write that down, the Yellow Book.
The Yellow Book by Gil Carson. I can't get Gil Carson to respond to me. I don't know if he's a real person.
He might not be. He doesn't. You know what? He doesn't respond to me either. So there you go.
I think he's a real
I've tried.
person.
I've tried.
Yeah, I think it's just somebody that's putting out this information, putting it under a pen name, because this guy never responds. And
It could be like Commander X, right?
Right, like Commander X. Okay, I wanted to go back to the because I hang out with Len when we do conferences. Len and me and Sasha, we always hang out together. We have a lot of meals together.
He's a great guy.
He's a great guy. He's a great guy. So I think the exchange program was in the 60s. So we were mixing up the story. Roswell, that Errol Gray, she left in the 40s. Now, did she come back? We don't know, because she said, I'm not dead. And she kept appearing to the, what's her name, Matilda McAvoy. Yeah, she kept coming to her, because Matilda was upset. She said, well, I'm not dead. So she kept appearing to her, which is the interdimensional aspect of the gray aliens. They can appear in physical form. I've had them, I'm an old lady. I'm going to be 67. Just about 2 years ago, I had this a gray. I woke up, and I'm looking at the sunrise, because I have the sunrise right outside my window, and I somebody's looking at me. You know how you can feel it, and I turn around, and there's an owl. This is like the sun is coming up. I can see my room is illuminated. I'm not here for a breeding program. So there's an owl on the other side of my bed. So I turn around and I look at it. It was female, and I said, "Oh, really?" And then it immediately shape-shifted into the gray form, and then we had this dialogue. So she materialized 3D solid in my living room in the middle of the day.
Wow.
So I think that happened because, like Whitney Strieber, he said, you have to get used to them, but if you can learn how to get used to them, they will meet you. They'll come. He had one come and sit in lotus, and they would sit and meditate for hours together. If you remember that. I think that was maybe the second book.
Okay.
I read the whole series back in the day. But
I did back in the day, too, yeah. Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but, yeah, that's incredible, yeah.
Right. So, anyway, I've had many experiences with many beings, and I feel very blessed. Like, it's exciting to have this level of contact my entire life. And so I, too, am writing a book. And it's hard to get time to write because I'm doing all these shows. But I'm going to, at some point, just like, goodbye, world. I'm going to go write my book. I've got mine laid out in chapters, though. I gave it episodes. Like, you might have a lot of episodes in your life about things that happen. But you might label the what was that first episode? The light that changed. I mean, this is the light that changed your life, basically, right? Put you on your path.
I can look back and see that and make that case, yes.
Right. So, okay, so back to, where were we? Your original book. I like doing this little aside and then come back, so try to remember where we are. I usually have like a written list of talking points, and it's amazing. We'll go, woo, way out here. But you can always come back. It's called Circle of Life. Everything is connected. You might think it's unrelated, but then you come back and go, that was the point. So it makes things. So in your book, your original book, The Song Your Heart book, you were talking about the Rastafarians, how they're going around the world. They're spreading their message through song. Song is very powerful because you've got the beat and the rhythm and the words, and it perhaps goes. Sasha, who's an anthropologist, was they go into Fiji and Tongan, and they would do their religious songs in song and dance. So he's a young anthropologist. This was back in the early 60s. My husband's 80 now. And he was just taking all these notes, and then he finally went to his teacher, and he said, what are they saying? And he says, oh, they're talking about the Mormons and how the Mormons, they had the whole story of the Mormons, and here it was out in the South Pacific, and they're doing a hula dance and everything to it, and singing, so they did more than just the, playing the instruments. They like have this whole dance that really anchors it into the body, and they're just telling so it's a way of nonverbal or non-written history. And so he's there in the 60s, and this has been with them since the 1800s, when the Mormon story originated. And he said, oh, it's the Mormon story, because he was ignorant. He didn't know the Mormon story. So the Rastafarians are telling a story that is so long ago in ancient history, but it's going in this wonderful level. And I went to Jamaica in my second marriage in 1985, and I can remember seeing the Rastafarians. And I'm staring, and I'm getting into a tour, and you're not supposed to stare. And I go, I'm fascinated. Who are these people? What is going on there? Just looking at them, it was like sending chills up and down. And then one time we had a guide, and the guide came over to me. He says, I have to take my picture with you. And I said, I want my picture with you. So I had this wonderful picture. We were head to head. We were just in this delight, like, reconnecting souls that knew each other from long ago. So that's by the side. So back to you. Where do you want to go? After you wrote about the Rastafarians, what did you talk about in your first book or your second book? No, that was your first book. Yeah.
Well, so in the first book, part one was called Reggae Magic, and I explored how their concerts are really like rituals. And the different things that they do with that, and then the connections between what I define magic as and what they're doing. And basically, the world is run by magic. That was a idea that I first learned from Jordan Maxwell. He said, Bret, the whole world runs on magic. And so I wound up doing an article for Ufo Magazine that was called The Magic of Society. And so he made a case that society itself was a magical ritual. And then in the West, when we participate in consumerism, we're acting out the rituals, passing the dollar bill symbols to each other and acting in this thing that what we call regular life, right? And so, I just had to really think about this. Arthur C. Clarke said that magic was to a primitive culture what high tech is to an advanced culture. And so putting these things together, I studied with the Druid priestess by the name of Serona Knight, and learned an immense amount of things from Serona Knight, especially concerning magic and ritual. And so what I realized, because there's really no one definition of magic that I've seen anywhere. People have their definitions of magic, but some of them conflict, some of them agree. And it was really confusing for me as I was trying to figure out myself, what is magic? So what I figured I had to come up with my own definition and explain it to myself. So when I did that, I determined that magic was three things. Anytime a human consciousness uses symbols, intentions, and rituals, when you combine those three things, you are manifesting a desired outcome. Not just in formal magic, like a guy puts on a man or woman puts on a cone hat with a wand and a black robe, and you put a magic circle around. That's magic, okay. But it's more mundane than that. It goes to actually every aspect of human society. Our human consciousnesses live and breathe those three tools. We communicate with the symbols on multiple levels. We can't move energy without intentions. And then we have to act out those intentions with the symbols in the real world. That's called ritual. So everything a human does, I deduced, was really ritual. We're really magical beings born to use those three tools to continue to manifest God's will, right? And so I began to apply that to the Rastafaris, and I began to develop what I called looking at things through a magical lens. So when I started to look at society through this magical lens, like what Jordan was describing or what the Roots Reggae Rastas were describing, it really blew it wide open for me. Not only is Jordan Maxwell right, but both sides, let's just say to simplify, the good and the bad, they use the same tools. So it's like this giant magical battle, like from Fantasia, Mickey Mouse is having that battle with the other magician, and they're casting stuff at each other, and boom, back and forth, right? And so that looking at the world through that lens is what really blew it open for me. And seeing the same thing, the Roots Reggae Rastas said, well, we have to counter Babylon's magic with our own magic. And that's where you get the concerts and the music and the songs. They all came together in such a way that they claim they're countering the evils of the powers that be that have struggled for thousands of years to keep the common person down. Right?
Well, when I was a kid, I was born in '54, so when I started going to concerts in the '60s, we had people like The Who and Rolling Stones. So in those early concerts, and my parents would have freaked, but they were always passing joints around.
Sure.
So I'm a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old little girl, and I'm coming home stoned out of my gourd.
Okay.
Now, I didn't smoke, but it was a closed arena, so it's just this massive cloud of second-hand smoke that was going around. And I didn't realize this at the time, but now looking back, it's like, and that's kind of what was, I don't know if they can't do that now or they still do that, but, I stopped going to concerts years ago. But even the last ones I saw, which were kind of tame, there were still the joints going around. So nobody seemed to stop it. I mean, once you're in concert mode, it's like, that's just a part of the atmosphere. So now that makes the music go in really deep. Everybody is there. We're in a field, a grid, an energetic grid, and we're all grooving to the same music. And when I was little, and so these big, tall, 6-foot-plus guys would say, "Come on, little girl," and they pick me up, put me on their shoulders. So I had this grand view of all this stuff. So this would go in. I think it shaped me, and that's why I am today, because these are the things that you imprint when you're young. These things go in deep. Like you said, you grew up with Star Trek. I grew up with Star Trek. All those things you mentioned in the first part of the show.
Right.
So here we are. This is who we are. Who are you? So you were talking and interviewing these people, but what part did you experience that went in deep into your psyche and that shaped you to who you are? So you have your early UFO and all these things done, and so you really connected with the Rastafarians. Are they still in your life, or was that just a passing phase of yours?
No, I'm writing the second book, and it's going to be a trilogy. And the second book is called Tales of a Heavy Heart, UFOs, Magic, and Impending Doom. And, I'm still in contact with my Rastafarian contacts. I've done most of the interviews for that book. I'm in the middle of research, and, this whole COVID thing has really seemed to throw a wrench in a lot of my plans, like with everybody else, right? So I'm not alone, that's for sure. So things have just been delayed. Other life reasons, things have just been delayed, but I'm going to write 3 books about it. The third book is called let's see if I can remember the title, The Hyperdimensional Hydrosonic Photovoltaic Heart. That's the name of the third book. And it's going to be all about souls and how souls come to Earth. You mentioned earlier about how some souls got trapped on Earth. I read this really great William Henry book, and I forget which one of the early spiral-bound William Henry books I read, where he talked about when Tiamat, or one of its moons, crashed into or when one of the moons of Nibiru crashed into Tiamat, supposedly there was an exchange of souls in that crash, and some souls got trapped here on Earth. And so I always remembered that and had been fascinated by that. So book 3 is going to be about how the Rastas look at souls, where that knowledge came from out of Ethiopia. Is it come down from biblical stuff, or the Essenes from the Middle East? Or is there other stuff involved with that information about souls? So I'm really fascinated by that, but that's a little down the road. That's book 3, but the Rasta thing is a trilogy. And I think it's really important to look at what people call the conspiracy through their eyes, because they provide more corroboration for what, in the West, these conspiracy scholars are considered wackos by a lot of people, right? But when you realize that there are whole cultures built up in defense of that conspiracy, it starts to lend credence to the other people that some people call crazy. So I think that looking at this through the Rasta lens is really important.
I think that's the divide and conquer aspect, but they all have the same common root. It's all part of the human history,
right?
But it gets interpreted different ways. And so if we can get into that, great. So I wanted to go back and look at magic, because, we have religion and we have science. We kind of know what those are. Science has some hypothesis and you can prove it in the scientific method. And religion requires faith. My understanding of magic is like taking what you're wanting to manifest. And what we do in Tantra, I'm a Tantra teacher, is we do ritual around it. And we create an altar around it. But when you anchor it in with, like getting into a high orgasmic or altered state of consciousness, you can set your attention and you can bring it in and manifest it into 3D physicality. So I always tell everybody, my life has been a magical, mystical life, because I'm operating not on science and religion, because I kind of rejected traditional religion because it was too confined and restricted. And anything that tries to put me in a box, I go, no. I always said, don't tell me what to do, because I keep going outside the box. I go, okay, you're going to box me in. I escape out, and I go, whoop, next fire level. I keep looking at it. It's like infinity, right? You're always looking at it from a different perspective throughout the continuum, and that's me. I'm always looking at a different perspective. And Dr. Lessin Sasha helps me a lot with this, because she says, you don't think like other people. I go, no, I've never thought like other people.
That's a good thing.
It's true. Yeah. So I think we really need to look at magic, because people are dismissing magic. But this ability to manifest, because I think what we're doing is we're manifesting this reality. And that's my research. Now, when I was 4, I was taken on a tour at a mothership. And they showed me 24 potential future history, realities, dimensions, whatever. They were like, and it was like a 3D sensorium thing. It was like it's on its screen. So when they showed me the outcome number 1, which was the total annihilation of the Earth and everything, what that felt like. What does that feel like to be blown up? What does that feel like? So I experienced it. Then they showed me another scene. And the Earth was full, but there was all this destruction. And they kept getting better and better. Another scene. There was like 12 in the negative side and 12 in the positive side. And then it started getting lighter and lighter. And then final was the other end of the chain. So destruction of the Earth and total euphoria, paradisical. And so I at the end of it, I have this entire continuum of all the possibilities. Of course, those were 24 majors. There's trillions of little subcategories in between, but this is our potentiality of where humanity can go. And then they ask me, where do you want to go? Which one do you choose? And I was a 4-year-old, but I was also my eternal self. So I had the awareness of who I was in the continuum, and I felt very humbled, and I was just, my physical body was just crying. And I said, telepathically, I'll take the third one from the end, which is pretty paradisical, but it'll give us something to do. As we came back, everything was done to be born, right? So we're here to co-create. I think this magic thing can teach us how we're co-creating this And if we don't like it, we can change the channel. We can switch the lane. We are not, victims in this game of humanity, of the earth. We actually are very, very powerful beings and shift this. So be careful what you think and where you want to go because you're manifesting this. And that's why, don't get into the fear form, but also don't sit there a victim. Because some people just go, I'm only doing New Age. That doesn't get you anywhere. You really need to go and do your ritual, set your intention, and you can shift it. And so I've been trying that experiment since 2021 hit, and I'm doing really good. Because I'm tired. 2020 was I think it was a catalyst for us to not just sit there like a victim, but to empower ourselves, to change this. So I think that 2020 and COVID, that was our call for help. You know how people sometimes have they death by police or they try suicide. It was like humanity's attempted suicide. 2020, and some of us left our form, and it doesn't mean we're out of this continuum, this matrix where we keep coming back. Unless we do something for the whole system, we're going to keep coming back. And so we need to get conscious and improve it. And it starts with yourself. It starts with each individual. But we're very, very powerful people. So that's my thoughts. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, we're humanity doesn't even really know what its potential is. That's how asleep we are in mass. There's but you talked about Methuselah and Jesus and some other figures from the Bible a little while ago, and I've come to learn that those are what are known as ascended masters. That every human being, I was born Catholic, right? I was baptized Catholic, and everyone's born into whatever culture or religion that they're born into. And then it's after they're in it that they start to learn about it, right? And so, of course, I've had my own problems with religion and the hypocrisies of some of the things. And not to get into that too much, but I also learned about these things called ascended masters, that no matter where you are as a human being, no matter what society you're born in, no matter if you're black or white or red or yellow or whatever, blue like the Blue Avians, it doesn't matter, gray like Errol, it doesn't matter. We're all on a path towards ascension. Maybe some are ahead, are more advanced than others. Maybe some need more help. There's all a myriad of different scenarios. But the point is that, and I talked to JJ and Desiree Hertek about this, and I asked them about it, and they said, well, look, Brett, Brett, humans are doomed to perfection. So what that means is no matter how much humans try to screw things up, whether it's on an individual basis or on a large national basis or global, there's enough time in the universe for us to eventually get it right. And we're all going to ascend at some point. And so this is kind of the point of the current book that I'm writing right now, that it's from the inner earth people where it originates, this whole idea about ascension, because they claim, and I did a series of interviews with Diane Robbins. Do you know who Diane Robbins is?
No, who's Diane Robbins?
She is known as the ambassador to Telos, and Telos is supposed Yeah,
go ahead.
So Telos is supposedly the city beneath Mount Shasta in Northern California. And, and so according to that information, let me see if I got one of her books. This is one of her books on Telos right here, for those out there who are curious. And she talks to this guy named Adama, supposedly, through channeling. And according to Diane Robbins, Adama told her that they're trying to wake the surface people up because they claim that the earth and all its people need to move to the fifth dimension or ascend altogether. So that they've been working on us for thousands of years to try to get humanity to work up. And it's not just the people in Mount Shasta. There's ascended master schools and groups all over the world within different cultures and different ethnicities, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't care. God doesn't care what color your skin is or what culture you're born in, or if you're a man or woman. They don't care. It's all about soul growth, right? And so the idea is that humanity needs to stop warring, stop polluting the earth, start taking out the thoughts of destruction and death, and filling them with thoughts of love, joy, and immortality. And through that thought shift, they'll notice when we're ready, and supposedly they're going to come up to the surface, announce themselves, and then together we can start learning as one big human family again so we can all ascend. All right? So that's the information I'm getting from Diane Robbins. So,
do you know that Billy that came up from under, he came up as a child?
Oh, yeah, the guy that made him a colonel so he could go down to the level. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I forget his last name.
Yeah, I interviewed him a few years back.
Okay.
So that ties in with this. Is Diane related to Billy's story? I'm not sure what's going on there.
Well,
but
so
when I was a kid, I would go astrally down to the inner earth, but I don't remember. Once I got past a certain point, and I remember leaving my bedroom, walking down the stairs into my basement, and I would continue down, and I would go through some caves. This is all. I thought it was astral, but apparently in your astral form, I would reach down and I would touch liquid, and I got the sense of what the texture was and that type of thing. And then I ended up going to these underground cities and different structures. But then I don't remember anything. And I remember coming back, and I'd go crawl up. I had to walk through my house and back and crawl back in my body. And then I could sleep and wake up longer. So I guess I need hypnosis on that. But maybe she has some information about where I was going. I would do that like every night. It haunted me for years and years and years. Like something I was trying to work out. So maybe on some level I'm from there. I don't know. It's just like this. It's insane. So here, years later, everybody's talking about inner earth and telos, and I'm going, well, I was there, but I don't know what I was doing. So anyway.
Well, so
what is under there?
So what's under there? Well,
yeah.
In a nutshell, the whole universe is under there.
Mm-hmm.
The inner earth traditions hold that it's really on the inside of the earth, which is where it all goes down. You know, we look outside and we see we're externalizing stuff, but supposedly everything is within, and that's supposedly the same is true for our planet, that everything is really within the earth, and that the communication with all these other dimensions or planets really happens through the inner earth. So what's down there? This is all part of my current book, UFOs and Inner Earth Public Relations. I began to see similarities in all the different inner earth stories, right? You'd run into things like giants down there. You run into things like UFOs down there. You run into other high tech down there. You run into long lifespans, which we might call immortality from our perspective. There's a whole series of things. Right now I have a chart that I'm building where I have 15 different traits that are shared by 12 or 13 different famous stories, including stories from the Bible, or say like the Smoky God, or Diane Robbins information, or there's stuff about Agartha or Shambhala, the Operation High Jump. I'm mixing all these stories and I put them in a chart, and they have at least 15 things in common. And so I began to put the information from Adama through Diane Robbins together with my own public relations training, and I began to realize, hey, these inner earth stories, which come from thousands of years ago all the way to the present, they have generally the same information. And so I started thinking to myself, what is it that where information is repeated over and over again? And the first thought was, that's an advertising campaign. And then the second thought was, oh my God, it's a public relations campaign. And so that's what this next book's about. It's about competing public relations campaigns where, let's just to simplify, and I'll go into much more detail in the book, but to simplify, the good guys are trying to wake up humanity so that we can all join together, inner earth and outer earth, and then ascend into the fifth dimension, right? The bad guys the bad guys are trying to stop that evolution so that they can use our planet as like a free energy machine where they have free slave labor. They can produce all kinds of food with their little minions. They can harvest the minerals from the planet, all this stuff, right? So they want to go against the Ascension campaign and distract us and confuse us so that we can remain unempowered and thereby controllable. So,
what about the idea, I've heard this from a number of people, that we are their commodity, that they're harvesting, that they are selling us as slaves. Sometimes we're even used as food.
right,
Different species like human flesh,
right.
sex slaves. It's not just trafficking on the earth, it's interstellar, intergalactic, throughout the solar system.
You know, there's many different scenarios that describe humanity as a kind of a cattle, like we treat cattle on Earth today, right? If you take kids out to see cows, the kids love the cows, right? And they have fun out there. I've been on a field trip to a petting zoo before, when I was a kid. But that's our food. That's our food, right? So just put yourself in the cow's shoes. Do you think the cows are really thrilled about being here? I'm thinking probably not. If they had a chance to either be the human or the cow, which one would you choose? I would choose a human, right? So I think since there's a hierarchy in reality in the universe, we're somewhere in the middle and we have dominion over everything below us. But I think there's some beings that are higher than us. Some of those beings are really good and they have the highest interest in mind concerning humanity. Those are what we might call ascended masters. But there are other beings that are on those levels that couldn't give a rat's you-know-what about humanity. And then there are other beings... Go ahead.
The problem is, apparently it's just one big intergalactic food chain. And so we are seen as sheep, as food, as slaves. Is there a way out of this hierarchy? Or is this just artificially imposed upon us? And since we believe it, we act it out and we become it. Are we really just the same as ascended masters? And maybe we volunteered to come in and be the cows and the sheep, the pigs and the humans, or something we're gaining from it.
That's a good point. That's a good point. So I also study law is one of the things I study. And what I learned about law was that it's all about contracts. And so as I started to roll that thought around my head, I began to realize that, there's that old saying that humanity is bound in the flesh. Okay, our spirits are bound in the flesh. Well, a binding is what happens when you're in a contract. It binds you to the terms of the contract. Okay, well, a binding is also another name for a magical spell. So I think that we agreed to be bound in the flesh for the purposes of soul growth. So that the number one reason why individuals come to this earth is to grow as a soul. But while we're here, we have a choice to participate in other agendas if we so choose. Some ascended masters then think that all of humanity is worth getting on the same page so that everyone can advance. But there are other species, and you mentioned some of them earlier, there are other species that are on their own evolutionary path, and like a cow is to us, we are to them. So I don't know why it is that way, Janet, but it's one of those things. It's one of those things that as a soul, I think when we saw the terms of agreement to incarnate down here in a body, become a little baby, come out of our mom's womb, and to be on this planet, we knew that all this stuff was happening, and at least I like to think that I chose to come here so I could make a difference, along, not just with my own soul, but in the bigger picture that affects everybody. And
I think sometimes people discover their contract with themselves, why they decided to come in here, to bind themselves in the flesh. Sometimes I've met people that came in with full recollection of who they were before they came in. Apparently, I had recollection. They shut me down in 18 months or so my mother was trying to kill me because I was saying things that, like, my mother was freaking out. She was very religious. She thought she gave birth to the demon seed, right? So she was acting out on me. So they turned it off so I wouldn't be talking, too intelligently to her because she got freaked out. Very religious woman. So I was going to say something about that. So anyway, so some people came in, like Jesus and Buddha, and they're conscious, so they're not trapped in this or this to be cattle or sheep or slaves.
Right.
So they're aware of that. Then the experiencers are saying when they realize they have a contract with the aliens to abduct them, they will break their contract. That's part of the ritual that experiencers that are having this contact that they don't want, they will just break the contract and do a ritual.
Contracts are dynamic.
Break our contract with coming into this form and being like a victim, being in this lower hierarchical level, or are we stuck with this until we die? What do you think?
Well, in Christianity they say to commit suicide is a sin. And that kind of is reflective in our business today. When you break a contract that you've agreed to, that's seen as a bad thing. So personally, I think that, one of my old favorite football players, Jim Plunkett, was a quarterback for the Raiders. And in an interview, he said that, because he was really old before he retired, he said, I'm not retiring. Those guys are going to have to take the jersey off my back. I'm not going. That's how I kind of feel with this life. I think God gave me this life to make a difference on multiple levels, not just with my own soul, but on other levels. And I feel like I'm a good person, and that those dark forces are going to have to kick the crap out of me if they think I'm going to leave. So I'm staying, and no matter how hard it gets, I'm staying to finish whatever work I have to do. So, I mean, you can renegotiate your contract, but you can't. I don't think you can leave without affecting it, timelines or whatever. You're here for a reason to affect a certain timeline in a certain way. That's my.
That's okay. So to go with the ascension thing, which is what we're running out of time in a little bit more. So I wrote 2 contracts. I got 2 divorces, right?
Okay.
So I have broken contracts.
Right.
And I think it was a good thing because I stayed, they would have killed me. They were abusive relationships, and I couldn't. It was unsustainable. My life was unsustainable. So I had conflicting contracts. So I broke one contract to continue my contract I have with this vehicle. I'm in a symbiotic relationship, my soul with this body, and I'm here to fulfill my contract. And I don't have full memory of that at this moment, but I'm supposed to be here for this time and to do, like you're saying, to do the work, to affect the entire consciousness of the planet. And we've been looking at ascension since I think the 80s, this whole concept of ascension. So when we ascend, we're not going to be taking this body with us, apparently. Will it change in form? Tell us more about what you think ascension is and how that will pan out. If we are suddenly going to ascend tomorrow, what is it? The rapture of the Christians? Is it all the UFOs beaming us up? Do we really want to be beamed up? Or are they just going to harvest us? In Jewish culture, come to the harvest, come to the... What is the harvest? I really want to go to the harvest. Are they harvesting me? So what do you think this is?
Well, great questions, of course. There's a few questions in there, it seemed like. What is it going to look like? I think unless we die, we're going to be here. This is where we're born. And I think we're going to be on... Can you see me still? Can you hear me?
You're frozen. Yeah. Oh, well. Just keep talking. We're almost done.
Okay, you can hear me, though. Okay, that's good. So
I can hear you. You're just frozen.
Okay. So I think ascension is going to be, we're going to still be on this planet because according to Ascended Master philosophy, the whole planet with all of its beings is going to move into the 5th dimension. So we're still going to be here and we're still going to be us. But there's going to be no more war. There's going to be no more poverty. There's going to be a free sharing of not only information but high tech, which is going to reduce poverty on a number of levels. And I think individual people are going to learn to transmute their own negative baggage so that they're not blocked anymore from expressing love. And so my envision, and I don't know if I'm right at all, I'm purely speculating here, right? But my vision of the fifth dimension of our ascension is being on Earth, but with total love and no war and mature people, I guess is what you could say, who aren't squabbling over little stuff, over limited resources or relationships or anything like that. Okay. It's just bliss, heaven on earth. And in fact, I study at a certain church where they talk about that heaven, where it is now, is only a temporary space, and that eventually it's going to be lowered onto earth. So that you could look at that as a metaphor for ascension right there. Heaven coming onto earth. So I'm not sure why I'm frozen, but I'm frozen on my end too.
Oh, you're frozen. Well, we're going to wrap this up. We've gone almost 2 hours. So,
yep.
So how about a good place to wrap this up? So what are your last words that you want to tell our listeners? And I will upload this and your friends can get the link. I have to sign off. I have to see if I have recording because you're recording. I'm not sure if I'm recording as well. Can we both record? I think so. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay.
What would you like to say? I
guess lastly, I'm writing 2 books right now. One is volume 2 in my reggae trilogy. The trilogy itself is called Esoteric Guide to the Reggae Vibe. And book 1 again is Song in Your Heart, Story of the Search for the Lost Note. That came out in 2008. I'm writing book 2, which is Tales of a Heavy Heart, UFOs, Magic, and Impending Doom. That'll be out in a year in December. But before that comes out, I'm going to release UFOs and Inner Earth PR, or the short title is UFO PR. And that's going to document the public relations campaign being perpetrated on the surface by the Inner Earth people and the occupants of UFOs, all towards this idea of ascension. And then at some point, I'm going to be launching a radio show. And I've also been in contact with various TV production companies to bring – I have a couple different documentary ideas that I've been fleshing out. Like we discussed earlier about the History Channel, there's definitely areas where we could take stuff a little further. And I think all of that together, the intention is for that to not just help me explain it to myself of what's going on here, but anyone else who listens to me is just icing on the cake. The more of this information we can get out to people, the more chance we have for people to participate in not having war, to not pollute, to not hate, and to not project ideas of skin color onto other people. And if I can achieve any of those goals with my work, I'm a happy man. And I don't know that I can, but I know that I came here to try. So check me out on Facebook if you like what's going on here. And I don't have a web page just yet, but hit me up on Facebook if anyone has any comments. And I am always honored to be on with you, Janet, so thank you.
We'll have you back again, especially once you get your second book written.
Yeah.
And we'll do the third, and we'll just keep going. You know, I think it's there's a lot of competition out there in the world, especially in ufology, but I think it's going to take all of us uniting and coming together because there's so few of us to really make this happen. So I just encourage people to set aside differences, join us, and remember that we all love each other at the highest level.
Right.
That's bringing heaven, loving each other, bring it down into 3D physicality, and work out your differences. You know, if you can't do it just one-on-one with the other person, get somebody to help mediate. But now is the time to heal and come together and to resolve these inner and outer conflicts that have been resulting in horrible 2020, but we're in 2021. Thank you once again, Bret Lueder, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
It was a great time. Much love and blessings and aloha to everybody.
Aloha. Thank you, Janet. Yes, say hello to Sasha for me.